I'm Crystal Cox, and I am a tax credit reviewer with the Division of Historic Preservation. This is one in a series of presentations designed to help you through the historic rehabilitation tax credit application process. This tutorial will focus on those parts of the tax credit application that most applicants either forget to fill out or fill out incorrectly. When these particular items are not filled out correctly, it could result in a delay in the processing of your application. So you'll want to make note of these things so that the application process goes as smoothly for you as possible. Many of these errors can be avoided by doing three things, and those are taking the time to carefully read the entire application. The federal applications especially have a lot of small print that you will want to make sure to read because oftentimes that writing contains important information or instructions that you'll need. Taking your time and making sure not to rush. Rushing to get the application in probably accounts for the majority of the errors that are made. So while you may want to get these filled out and submitted as soon as possible, if they're turned in incomplete or contain mistakes, they'll just be sent back to you for correction, which will only end up costing you time. And you'll also want to make sure to proofread the applications at least once, preferably several times before you turn it in, because if you take the time to do that, you'll probably find at least one mistake that you can correct in advance. So we'll start with the federal application. This is a federal Part 1. Some things you'll want to make sure to pay attention to here are, before you even begin, make sure you are using the correct version of the form. The National Park Service has changed their forms about 3 times in the last several years, and some of those older versions are still floating around, but these won't be accepted. So you'll want to look at the right-hand corner of the form to make sure it has 2014 on it. This is the latest version and the one you'll need to use. You'll also want to make sure you have an original wet ink signature on the signature line and the applicant's social security number or tax ID number. Electronic signatures are not accepted, and you'll also want to double check for accuracy with the social or tax ID numbers to ensure there are no missing digits. If the signature is electronic or a photocopy, or the social or tax ID number is not included, or it's missing digits, the application will either be sent back to you or you will have to submit a new one. You'll also want to take notice of the small paragraph in Section 4. This is probably the number one thing that applicants miss. This paragraph pertains to the ownership of the building, and if you look within it, there are 2 tiny boxes. One of those boxes needs to be checked by the applicant or the application is considered incomplete and will be returned to you. If you are the applicant and the owner of the building, you check the first box. If you are the applicant but do not own the building and are applying on behalf of someone else, you check the second box. And if you are checking the second box, you must also submit a written statement from the owner stating that he or she is aware that this application is being submitted. These instructions are also contained within the paragraph itself. Next, we have a federal Part 2 application. The same rules will apply here as with the Part 1. You must have the correct version of the form, an original wet ink signature, and the appropriate box in Section 4 must be checked. But what you'll want to make note of with this application is Section 2. This is asking for information pertaining to the project. There are several blanks here. You'll want to make sure you answer each question and fill out each blank. Even if what it's asking doesn't pertain to your particular project and the answer is 0 or NA for not applicable, you'll still want to put that in the blank. Next, we have a federal Part 3. Again, the same rules will apply as before with regard to having the 2014 version of the form and the original wet ink signature. But again, you'll want to make sure to read the paragraph in Section 4 very carefully because it is different from the ones on the other forms. Unlike on the Part 1 and Part 2 forms, on the Part 3, you will only check the box if you are not the owner. So you'll want to make sure to read the language very carefully. Also, again, you'll want to make sure you fill out everything in Section 2, leaving nothing blank. The dates to be provided in this section must be in month, day, and year format. So if it is asking for your project completion date, it is not enough to say July 2016 or summer 2016, for example, but an actual date must be provided. Also, the form will ask you for 2 numbers. The first is the QREs, or qualified cost. Those are the costs that are credit eligible. And then it will ask for the total project cost. This is both the QREs and non-QREs together. So those are the federal applications. Now here we have the state commercial applications, parts 1 and 2. These are similar to the federal applications. They ask for much of the same information and also require a wet ink signature. The major difference, though, is that they do not have that applicant statement where you have to check a box. Also, with the state, the form is not dated, so you don't have to use a particular version. However, our office did recently update these forms to include the applicant's email address. So if the version you are using does not ask for your email address, please be sure to write that information somewhere on the application. You can find the latest version of the forms on the State Commercial Tax Incentives page of our website. Where there are notable differences, though, between the federal and state commercial is with the Part 3 application. Here, the state commercial application is asking for two numbers, the amount of QREs and the amount of non-QREs or associated costs. So if you think back to the federal Part 3, you'll note that the required numbers are slightly different on this form from those on the federal. The federal form asks for total project costs and the state form does not. This is just something to be aware of when you're filling these out. So you don't want to just copy the same figures from one form to the other. You'll want to read carefully to make sure you're providing the numbers the form is asking for. Also, one big item of note, the federal form asks for estimates of final costs. So for the federal, it's okay if you just have a general idea of what your costs are. However, the state form really wants you to have the complete and accurate numbers. So ideally, there won't be any estimates here. If you do estimate on the state form, that's okay, but you should know that if you provide an estimate and then after you crunch your numbers, it turns out your QREs happen to be more than what you initially claimed, the Department of Revenue is going to require you to submit a revised Part 3 form to us for approval. So that is just another step you will have to take at the end of this process when you're ready to be done and receive your credit. And so finally, we have the state residential application. These applications are generally easier to fill out than the commercial ones because they require less information. The big thing you'll want to be aware of here with regard to filling out the form is to make sure the form you turn in has the blank at the bottom for our office to sign on the application. With these applications, if you fill them out electronically and create additional spaces, it will push the state signature line to a separate page and we will have to sign, and we have to be able to sign on the same page. So that is just a brief rundown of the most frequently missed items on the federal and state tax credit applications. If you have any questions about the information presented here, please give us a call at the number provided. Thank you for listening.